Hello, my name is Six. I have a hat. I'm Six in his hat, and this is my new channel looking at my pre-2000 computer equipment, starting with my Dell Precision 410, simply because this is going to be a video going over my full build process for my pre-2000 machines, and this one has been untouched. It is as it arrived to me. So let's get on and have a look at the case. Pretty standard looking case from the outside. Needs a bit of retro bright, obviously. There's the all important Dell Precision logo. These were insanely expensive when they came out, even though they weren't massively powered. This is, of course, a dual processor capable computer. So at the moment it's got a single Pentium 3 450. You can see those little bars in between the optical drives. I'm not sure if the optical drives are meant to sit behind the faceplate at the front, or whether you have to have a specific one that fits. At the moment, that's just wedged behind. And you can see there the odd miniature floppy drive that they put in these for absolutely no reason at all. On the back, we can see the form factor isn't ATX, it's a bespoke Dell plate, which kind of looks like NLX, but a full width NLX, so kind of twice the width of a normal ATX panel. And you can see there that we've got some SCSI connectors, again indicating why this costs so much at the time. 10100 network, audio, PS2 and USB. So when it came out it had everything. Then something I found interesting, some people may not, is the way that the case opens. So you flip the button on the side and it does a DeLorean style gold wing door that you open up, which I always find quite amusing on these. Got a few of these cases floating around. Not all 410s, we'll come to that at some other video. So here we have the PCI slots, one of which they call RAID. For a RAID card, it's kind of a 64-bit PCI slot, maybe. I've never tried anything but a RAID card in there, so I won't be able to tell you. Nice flick-up power supply. Power supply is not ATX. If you put that power supply on another motherboard, it will explode on a standard ATX motherboard. And if you put standard ATX power supply in there, it just doesn't work. Slightly unusual RAM that this one came with. This is, of course, registered buffered RAM, but these particular sticks are kind of two sticks in one, which I've never seen before in all my years of doing IT. I was working on IT when this came out and never once saw it. So then you got an 18mm fan providing airflow to the CPU cooler there. Dual CPU capable, one CPU installed, and one of these CPU blanking cards. So this just completes the circuitry where needed in order to provide the computer the information it needs to know that it's got one processor, not two. We won't be needing that. And here we have the P3 450 that came with this unit. Rather flimsy, horrible heatsink on it, very wobbly. The fan there is also broken and the plastic snapped. SL35D, I think, if we zoom in, yeah, looks like it. Again, very flimsy, very, very cheap heatsink. I don't know why they went so cheap on heatsinks, seeing as the whole unit would have been extortionate. They came, interestingly, with advanced workstation graphics cards, which aren't any good for gaming or anything, so I didn't bother getting that. Again, you can see the power supply. If you compared that to your ATX power supply, you'd note that the pinout is different, and like I said, it would explode, literally explode, if you plugged it into an ATX motherboard. And there is the floppy drive connector. So it's got a standard floppy drive connector if you just want to plug in a floppy drive, a normal one, 3.5 inch, but it comes with that weird one. I'm not quite sure why again. And then we have this horrible bit of plastic. So let's have a bit of a dig into those processors. Like I said, it's dual processor. Back when this was released, the only operating system that I used that supported 2 processors or more would have been Windows NT. I put Windows 2000 on because that was released before the year 2000, so I get away with that on a technicality, just so I can use the dual processor functionality. Of course, 98 only used 1 processor. So as you can see there, that's the clip that's meant to hold that horrible heatsink in, and it is horribly broken. The other side isn't broken and also won't pull out. This was really quite frustrating. I didn't want to damage the processor because I wanted to reuse it, but I wanted to put on what I would call proper heatsink and fan. So I ended up pulling one side out, and the other side, unfortunately, as you can see there, just kind of snapped horribly. They're meant to pop out. So you can see that the bits of plastic still remained. Absolutely no chance of getting those out as it was, apart from that one. So the idea here is to clean it up, take the back plastic off, pull out the pins, put on my new old stock CPU cooler, and then we'll go from there. So let's clear this rubbish out of the way. And here we have my new old stock cooler, bought from eBay for not a lot of money at all. Pentium 3 CPU cooler. Still brand new in the packet. I don't know what the wing is for. I'm assuming because it's got a fan. No branding on it. It's just a horrible cheap generic one, but it's actually really quite well made. So you've got powder coated aluminium, you've got the clips, 4 pins go through the 4 holes instead of having 2 lots of clips. Metal pins, metal backplate, so all good. Obviously the thermal paste there is 25 years old and was completely gone. There's absolutely no point having it there, so clean it off. Really kind of just chalky by this point. But then I suppose it is 25 years old and it has been in working computers, so not to be too surprised at that. Obviously the off-die cache, which also needs cooling. But as you can see, it won't go on because there's still those bits of plastic sticking into in through the circuit board there. Not getting them off that way because they won't pop out that way. They're not designed to, so let's take off the back plastic. You can't see just at the moment, but there is a small split pin plastic connector there. One of those ones where you push in the 2 sides whilst applying pressure, and that allows it to slip back through the hole that came through. Obviously wanted to retain the back plastic, wasn't worried about the clip, but the back plastic I did want to retain, so these clips are slightly more important than the ones holding on the original heatsink there. Push the pins together, apply pressure, get frustrated, and off it comes. So now we have access to those horrible little bits of plastic clip, which we'll have a look at in a bit more detail later. So push them out from the other side, where they came from obviously. And there we go. That's the back of the P3450. Nothing to write home about there. Put the backing plate back on. Those clips just poke through. That's a bit of video for somebody else's thumbnail, not mine. And now those 4 pins are able to pass through the circuit board, pass through the back plate, and then be attached by the metal slider. Before that happens, obviously I took off all the old janky heat paste, thermal paste. So got some new stuff, some Antec generic, don't need anything special. Obviously I've been questioned about why I've got these syringes lying around by almost everybody who sees them. It's just thermal paste. Clips together nice and easy. Don't need anything else in the box. And then the angle of those sliders uses friction to hold the cooler in place. And there we have a cooler. The other one of these processors, and I didn't upgrade the processors to the maximum 550 because I had a spare 450, exact same model, just lying around in the box. So this one, somebody had already replaced the cooler. It is aftermarket, it is remarkably similar, apart from obviously the faceplate and the fan slightly different, and that is the little grommet. So it was always designed to push out or pull out, but it never did. So that is processor 0, and then we move to processor 1. Holding the camera like that meant I had to use my left hand. And as you can see, the fit is very tight. You can see why bespoke heat sinks were used in a bespoke cooling system of the 80mm fan and the plastic. However, it is much better to have independent cooling for each. So as you can see, it slots in. Being that it's got its own bespoke cooling, there is no facility to plug in the CPU fans that I've just attached. So this is a cheap aftermarket eBay jobby fan controller with just a pot on the outside to control the speed. I've got one of these in a different system, and you do have to be careful because there are exposed components on the back of the boards. Those exposed components carry 12 volts, and if you touch them when it's on, although it doesn't really hurt, you can certainly notice it. And if you're not expecting it, it can make you jump. So again, these come with a Molex connector on one side and the ability to control up to 3 fans, 3 normal fans. You don't get the speed element, you just power a fan so it spins. As you can see on the Molex connector there, it's just ground and 12 volt. The Molex connector I tried plugging it into is one of the shorter ones, which I believe some SiXXiS standard. It's like a standard Molex power connector, but half the depth for some reason. So there you go, half depth, full depth. Not quite sure why. So found a full depth connector. Had a usual trouble of Molex pins connecting. Put them together. Put the fan power on, and then it was time to power it up for the first time with the 2 processors. Standard 3-pin, and the other standard 3-pin, with room for the 80mm fan if I choose to do so. However, if you unplug that fan from the motherboard, it does give you a BIOS error. You can see it hanging off there where the clips are broken, which is slightly annoying. So plug the power in, turn it on, and see what happens. Me trying to work out on the circuit board where the power button was without the case. So fan controller lights up. That noise is a dead bearing. So the next thing I did was take out the second processor, the one I already had. You can see there it looked like the fan was easily removable, so let's try and remove it. Unfortunately, when I tried to remove it, two of the plastic lugs snapped, and there was no real way of getting that faceplate off, because otherwise I would have just rammed some screws in. So, with some regret, it was time to, shall we say, disassemble the old faceplate, which turned out to be plastic, so quite easy to snap off. And then go through the same process as before. Remove the old heatsink, clean it up, Arctic Silver, sorry, Antec. Put it all back together, and then we have two identical brand new heatsinks, which is good for the lifetime of the fans. It means they've not been spinning for 20 years or so. You can see the fit for those sticky outy clips was ridiculously tight, but even jiggling around, there is no real capacity for those two to hit the fans. Quite generously, it came with an ATI Rage Pro 128, but I am a bit of a NVIDIA fanboy, so I took that out and instead used what was marked as a Reba TNT2. Unfortunately, this is the M64 model. Still 32 meg. However, it's the kind of cheaper version of the TNT2. They are different drivers. For example, there is some functionality difference. Not a lot. You're not going to notice it playing most games of the era, so I'm not particularly worried, but I was a bit disappointed that I'd mislabeled that one. So chalk that out to experience. Here we have the sound card I'm going to use. It does have onboard crystal sound. I'm going to use it for gaming, so just an old Sound Blaster Vibra 16. They do have the proper Yamaha APL synthesizer chip. Everybody seems to think the Vibra was a kind of dodgy card, but they're actually quite capable. And that card's from '94, so really quite old. Slots into the remaining ISA slot with enough pressure, because it's never been used, to dent my finger. Now we've got everything cable tied up, looking quite tidy, at least comparatively so, and it's time to turn the machine on. In doing so, nothing. At some point I'd managed to dislodge that Molex connector there. So it's time to turn it off quickly, reseat it, and there we go. That blue LED indicates whether it works or not. Turning the knob to 0 gives you no light at all, so you do have to turn it up a little bit. One thing this also gives you, obviously, is some control over the sound of the fans, and clip the side back on. Nice and easy to do, even with one hand. Job done. So let's give this a boot. It's the A14 revision of the BIOS. There is a newer one that I will chuck on there. And here we have the 7890 SiXXiS BIOS, which is the only one I'll be using. Came with an 8 gig, I believe, Ultra 2 SE SiXXiS drive. Time and date were actually correct, which I imagine this computer's been off for a number of years. I was very happy about that. I did check the battery, looked good, there's no leakage. You can see there that the CPU speed is 450. CPU IDs match, which is good. It's got case intrusion. There's a little micro switch, so every time you open the case, it does give you a BIOS warning. And this is the boot sequence, booting from CD-ROM first, obviously, because I haven't got an operating system. Keyboard errors, etc, etc. So next we install Windows 98. This is what I use for kind of playing most games and benchmarking. Everybody's seen 98 go on about 1,000 times who'll be watching this video, so we skip through most of it until we get to this point where it freezes, at which point I start questioning everything I've done up to this point. In real time, because obviously it was sped up, I think we were looking at around about 10 minutes. There was no keyboard response, no mouse response, nothing at all. However, if you turn around and do something else for 10 minutes, it does actually proceed, which I was very surprised at. This is me setting up all the standard Windows 98 bits. In the UK, British keyboard layout, etc. And here we have, as it appeared, Windows 98. Straight out the box, because it is a Dell and they were good with their OEM drivers, you could immediately get an IP address from DHCP. So this is just a standard modern router that it's connected to. Nothing special at all, and it works straight out the box, which means, I was just looking at the time code there on the screen, it was getting quite late by this time, that you can immediately, once you get past all this nonsense, connect to the internet. So no, I don't want MSN. How did I get around that? This is one of the most annoying things about Windows, and they still do it today, is that they try and force their products upon you, even if you don't want them. So even though I said no internet services, no online services, there's still an online services folder on the desktop, and there's still a wizard that takes you directly to their product. And that hasn't really changed. They still try and force Internet Explorer on you, even though it's terrible. So here we go. I want to connect through the LAN. No proxy. And go. So obviously that's something you don't have to do nowadays, but in the past you would have had to choose whether you go through proxy or dial-up, or just through your LAN, which was much rarer back then. And here we have it, fully functional internet, fully functional Google. This was filmed in May of 2022, and it just works straight out of the box. So what I did was turned on, off video unfortunately, turned on the internet file sharing, shared this folder, and then copied stuff across. In order to do so on Windows 98, you have to turn SMB-v1 on your network, which is generally not recommended, especially in a corporate environment, because it's massively insecure. However, within my house, I don't really care. It allows me to copy files directly to this machine. And again, I'm copying from a very modern Windows 10 machine, and you just go to the IP address, go to the share, and off you go. SMB-v1, you don't need to put username and password in. So that's the graphics drivers going on. Again, these drivers are widely available. If you'd like them in the next video, there's a link, then please put a comment. So back to the logon screen. I skip the reboots just to save time, because it does take a minute. So this is now with the correct graphics driver installed. And here we go. Again, Microsoft set the home page for you, even though I set it to Google before restarting. But this is actual real Google on the actual real internet on a machine from 1998 and an operating system from 1998. And there's Google image search, and it just works. Brilliant. One thing I like to do with Windows 98 specifically is copy the Windows 98 folder into an admin folder on the C drive, just because the way it worked is that every time you install a driver, even if you have all the driver files, it would sometimes refer back to its original Windows 98 disk. If you copy this folder over, then it will all those files will be on your C drive, so you can then put your CD away instead of keeping it permanently there. So you can see I sped things up a little here. What I'm running there is unofficial SP3. This is kind of a fan-built, unofficial, not released by Microsoft service pack from Windows 98, and it's got some brilliant stuff. It's got performance improvements, it's got DirectX versions, it's got software, it's got regedit tools, everything that would have been included had they continued support. That error message you always get. You can't copy one of the files off the CD, but it's one of the ones that doesn't matter, so that's fine. And here we go through. These are all the things you can install. I won't bore you with every single one of them, because a lot of them, for example, the main system update, you have to do a restart after you install it, as you do with several others. So there's DirectX 9C, brilliant, don't have to worry about installing that. And it's just a really nice pack. If, again, people want a link to it, then please put a comment below, and I'll chuck it on a share somewhere. NTFS drivers, very important. If you're dual booting, like I intend to on this system, it means you can read the Windows 2000, you've got the standard performance tweaks, remote desktop connection terminal, also very useful, tweak UI, all of the things that we used to do back in the day to bring Windows 98 up to speed included in one pack. So there we go. That's all installed. I also installed 3D Mark, a 3D Mark 99 Max. They give that away for free on their website now with a free key. It's not freeware, but you can get it for free and run it without any cost, which is awesome. So that's just going to go through on standard settings. I've sped it up so the entire test only takes 20 seconds. So many times I have seen those screens over the years. Brilliant. 32 meg cards, so didn't do too bad. And we end up with 4036 3D marks. So for the time, ridiculously good. By 2001, this machine would have started looking quite old. There really was a ramp up in technology at the time. So want to dual boot, so we've got 2 hard drives, 1 SATA and 1 IDE. Not SATA, sorry, 1 SCSI, but 1 IDE. I didn't have a SCSI ribbon with more than 1 connector, i.e. the one that came with the computer itself, so I couldn't put 2 SCSI disks in. I've run out, and we'll see those in other projects. So after I cleaned up all the stuff that fell over there, you can see in the corner, it has a handy little movable caddy. You can take the power with it as well. There's a special connector, but I didn't in this case. And it's just a case of removing the disc that was there and putting in the new ones. So, yeah, sorry, just putting in the second disc at this point in order to install Windows 2000. Some of you are ahead of me here. certainly ahead of me when I was recording this, but we'll come to that later. There's something obvious that has been missed here, and some of you will know about it and others won't. So you pop the caddy fully back in, he says. Give it a push. Again, old cases, destroy your thumb slightly, and then the sliding panel locks in, closes down, and that's your hard drive back in. So there's the IDE drive, 20 gig, plenty enough for Windows 2000. You can see I've put another internal drive, but external to the case there. My version of Windows 2000 is actually on a burnt CD, and it won't read on the drive that came with the unit. It was the drive. Some very old drives don't read CDRs. And there it is. Windows 2000 had an IP address. But yeah, in order to dual boot, you have to have it on the same drive with different partitions. Something I had forgotten. So then I went to this 80 gig drive and set up the partitions. I could use Parted Magic. This is Ultimate Boot CD. This is an old version, actually, a really old version. It's just a boot CD that comes with loads of free tools, completely free. What I like to do to partition the older machines is boot into FreeDOS and then use the free version of FDisk. The reason for that is that the Parted Magic runs on a flavour of Linux, I can't remember which one, and it takes so long to boot. Whereas that's FreeDOS up and running. Really useful to have one of these CDs laying around. A lot of the motherboards from this era didn't support USB boot, so it's useful to be able to boot into our version of DOS and just play around with the partitions. And here you can see a beta release, a debug beta release of FDisk. So we don't want to create a partition with the maximum size. We want to have two smaller partitions, one for Windows 98, 8 gig, and the remainder we will use as an NTFS partition later on. But we only need to define and set active, which Windows itself will do, the Windows 98 partition. So here we go, installing it, super sped up. No need to see all of that again. So again, super quick. M410 is the designation they use, so it's a Dell Precision M410 workstation. Even though it's not actually an M410, I don't know where the M comes from, but this is Windows 2000 being installed, and there, on the same disk, we have the remaining 27 gig, which we can create a new partition on, using NTFS, speed that up, or at least I would speed that up. Here we came into the second big problem with the build, and I'll leave that audio in. It's dead, just a dead disk. Worked up until that point and then popped its clogs. So rather than bore you, I went through the whole process again with another spare SiXXiS disk. I've got quite a few disks floating around, and that's what happens when you boot up. You get a choice between Windows 2000 Professional and just Microsoft Windows, which is Windows 98. You can call them different things in a config file, but I don't bother. So that is my build process. At least it is for a dual processor Dell Precision M410. Got any comments, questions, suggestions, things I could improve on my build process? There was quite a bit of cleaning that you didn't see. There's quite a bit of playing around with various bits that would have just been boring to put on video, but if you'd like a film cut video of the whole process, which would take hours because of the formats, then just give me a shout and I'll put one of those up. If you want to see something different, I'll operating system, then again, just give me a shout. And I'll be going through a number of my other systems, the quirks they've got, the various things they can and can't do without this entire build process. So this is just an introduction to what I do. It's a much longer video than I would usually expect to do. But the next one I might do is a very similar machine. It's actually a Dell Precision M610, which is the dual Xeon version, because I just so happen to have two P3 Xeon 550s with 2 meg cache, which were the best officially supported processor on these boards. Because of the voltage, you couldn't put in the faster ones, unfortunately, or at least you could, but only one processor, and it's a little bit flaky. I've also got, everything from a 486 right up to modern day equipment. But for this series, I'll be sticking to pre-2000. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time.